Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Rust on the Blade. A tale of stillness and sin. I want you to understand something before we begin. I am not a wicked man. I have never stolen bread. I have never drawn a knife on anyone who did not deserve the consideration, and never once lied to a woman who was not already lying to herself. In the city of Benton, that makes you practically a saint. My name is Milo, and for 22 years I traded in reclaimed goods, which is to say, I found things that had slipped from one person's hands and helped them into another's. Not theft, redistribution. I had a sharp eye, quick fingers, and one gift I prized above the rest, knowing when to be elsewhere, knowing when to walk away, when to close the door, when to let someone else's catastrophe remain someone else's. That is an art, and I had mastered it. I lived on Crooked Lane, 4th floor, a narrow room overlooking the alley where the dyers hung their cloth. The smell was wretched, but the rent was cheap, and cheap rent buys a man the greatest luxury in Benton, not owing anyone anything. Norman lived across the hall. He was a carpenter, and not a good one. Loose joints, optimistic measurements, customers who could not afford to complain. He had a wife named Ginny, and 2 children who ran through the corridors like cheerful disasters. Little Theo with his gap-toothed grin, chasing his sister Lila, whose laughter echoed like bells in a storm. I liked Norman well enough. The way you like a stray that wanders into your room uninvited. I mention Norman because he is the reason I am telling this story, and because what happened to him is the thing I cannot stop seeing when I close my eyes. It started in the wet season, when the river rose and half the craftsmen in the district lost their workshops to 3 feet of brown water. Norman lost everything: tools, wood, half-finished commissions. I knew this because Ginny wept through the wall, and because Norman knocked on my door one evening with his hat in his hands and his pride in pieces on the floor. He needed coin. Not a fortune, just enough to replace his chisels and buy dry lumber. Without tools, the orders would go unfilled. Without orders, the landlord would come. Without patience, the street. The need was plain, like the neighbor who passed by the wounded traveler in that ancient parable. I had 3 times the sum hidden beneath a loose board under my bed. I told him I was sorry. I told him times were hard for everyone. I told him I would think about it. He thanked me and left. I sat on the edge of my bed, listened to his footsteps cross the hall, and felt nothing at all, except a faint, private satisfaction that I had handled the situation gracefully. That is the trick, you see. The man who commits a visible wrong knows it. His hands shake, his stomach turns. But the man who does nothing? His hands are steady, his conscience clean. He slumbers undisturbed, ignorant of the gathering rust. The next week, Norman knocked again. His face was thinner. I told him I wished I could help, but I had expenses of my own. Debts he did not know about. A lie so small. I barely noticed it leaving my lips. The week after that, he did not knock. I heard him arguing with Ginny. I heard the children go quiet the way children do when the air in a house turns careful. Theo's games silenced, Lila's bells muffled, I heard the sound of a man sitting in a dark room with nothing to do, because his tools were gone and his hands were empty. I heard all of it. I did nothing. I convinced myself Norman's trouble was not my responsibility, that giving to a bad carpenter was poor investment, that the world is full of need, and a man who opens his purse to every weeping neighbor will soon be weeping himself. Every reason was plausible. A door I locked between my comfortable room and his collapsing life. And every lock was forged from the same metal. The absolute determination to keep what I had, regardless of what it cost someone else. There is a word for that metal, though I did not know it then. The word is sin. Not the dramatic kind that gets you hauled before a magistrate. The quiet kind. The kind that looks like prudence. The kind that sits in a comfortable, warm room and listens to suffering through the wall, calling its own cowardice wisdom. Old Petra, who sold herbs at the corner and had buried 2 husbands and 1 son, said something to me at the well one morning. I had not asked her opinion, but Petra had never once, in 70 years, waited to be asked. "You know what rust is, Milo?" she said. I told her I knew. "It is not the blade breaking," she said. "It is the blade sitting still. A sword that is used stays sharp. One kept safe in its wrapping rots from the inside." She looked at me with grey eyes that had seen more funerals than I had seen mournings. "You were not ruined by what you did, Milo. You are being ruined by what you refuse to do." 3 weeks after the flood, the landlord came for Norman. I stood in my doorway and watched them carry out his things, the children's blankets, Ginny's one good dress wrapped around a cooking pot, Norman's ruined apron, still stiff with old glue. Lila clutched a wooden horse that Norman had carved for her, the one thing too small for the landlord to bother taking. Norman walked out last, carrying nothing, and looked at me as he passed. He did not accuse or curse. He looked at me the way a man looks at a locked door he has stopped expecting to open. Something rose up inside my chest. Something I had kept sealed for 22 years of careful, clever, uninvolved living, like a wound reopening in the core of me. That evening, I sat alone, and for the first time, the silence was not comfortable. It was the silence of a courtroom after the verdict. The room was my witness, the coins beneath the floorboard, my evidence. And the verdict was not that I had done wrong, but that I had known what was right, known it deep in my veins, felt it pressing against the inside of my ribs, and I had chosen, deliberately, repeatedly, to do nothing. The cost of doing right is always less than the cost of knowing right and standing still. I learned that too late for Norman. I searched for 2 days. I walked streets I had spent 22 years learning how to avoid. Streets where need had faces, faces with names and hands that reached for you. I had always been the man who crossed to the other side. Now I was the one looking, and every alley I turned down felt like a corridor in my own chest I had never opened. I found them beneath a canvas awning near the fish market. Ginny was boiling water over a scrap fire, the children huddled in a single blanket, Theo whispering stories to Lila to keep her warm. I brought the money, all of it, not just what he had asked for, but everything beneath the board. "Why now?" Norman asked. I opened my mouth to say something clean, something that would frame the moment with dignity. What came out was broken. I had it. The whole time I had it. I sat on my bed, and I listened to your children go quiet, and I kept it because I was afraid that if I let go of it, I would become you." The last 3 words hung in the air like smoke. I had not known that was the truth until I heard myself say it. He looked at me a long time. Then he took the money. He did not thank me, and I did not want him to. You do not thank a man for returning what he should never have withheld. Old Petra was right, and the ancient word she echoed, without knowing she echoed it, was right. It is sin to know what you ought to do, and then not do it. Not a minor sin. Not a lapse in etiquette. Sin, full and heavy, the kind that rusts a soul, the way stillness rusts iron. I rebuilt nothing heroic with that confession. Norman got back on his feet. His carpentry never improved, but his children slept indoors again, their laughter returning like dawn after a long night. I do not tell you this, so you will admire me. I tell you this, so you will look down at your own hands and ask what they are holding that belongs to someone else. Grace does not undo the years. It fills the hands that wasted them. The word of God was never given to be admired from a comfortable distance. It was given to be done, and every hour it is heard and not obeyed, the rust goes deeper. You know this voice. You have locked this door. Do not wait for the rust to eat through. Draw the blade and open the hand while the metal still holds an edge, and the hour still answers to your will. Selah.